What's happening, everybody, and welcome to this mini lecture on the first of our critical approaches that we are going to be learning about and applying and really kind of using as a way to examine the literature that we read this semester. The new criticism. It's an offshoot of the School of Formalism, which we'll kind of talk about. And the funny thing is, it's actually not that new. It was developed in the 1920s and really kind of only held a lot of critical sway from the 20s through about the 1960s. And what the new criticism, what formalism really does is it seeks to focus the analysis of a literary text exclusively on the work of literature itself. It came about as kind of a result of really two main reasons. The first being that a lot of scholars were kind of tired of doing really just this kind of like really dry kind of analysis of like the evolution of the English language and sort of tracing usage through the years, but also it came about as a way to look at each work individually rather than this sort of like great works approach to literary studies. Like there was the canon that you studied and that was it, and the new criticism said no, well, we can apply the same level of scrutiny to anything. What it really does is it takes again a look squarely at the text itself, and it doesn't look at anything outside of the text. It doesn't take into account who's writing. It doesn't take into account the broader literary movements. It doesn't take into account contemporary history or any of the other things that we tend to think about often when we talk about literary study. And so in some ways it's good because, and there's a sense of valuable practice to it, but in some ways it's very not. So, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So I have here a set of kind of typical questions that the new criticism would generally tend to ask, and these are and every time you see a typical question slide or slides in one of these mini lectures, I'm pulling pretty much directly from the Purdue OWL's site on these various schools of criticism. So some of the questions that a new critic would generally ask would be like, how does the work use imagery to develop its own symbols? So how, like, for example, making a road stand in as a symbol for death simply by constantly associating that road with death. Again, we're not looking at anything outside of the text. How does the work do it itself? What is the quality of the work's organic unity, or how does how the work is put together reflect what it is? How does the construction of the text itself reflect or show or do anything about what the text is trying to say? It asks, how are the various parts of the work interconnected? How are they related to one another? How do paradox, irony, ambiguity, tension work in the text? Important to point out, when we're thinking about doing new criticism, when we're thinking about formalism, we're really looking we're looking extremely closely at a text. This is really, when we talk about doing close reading, this is really kind of what we're talking about doing. Looking at, word by word, punctuation, like, paying particularly close attention to these things. Other questions. How do these parts, paradox, ambiguity, irony, all these, how do the parts in their collective whole, how do they contribute or do they not contribute to the aesthetic quality of the work? What kind of, sense of style does the work have? How does the author resolve apparent contradictions within the work? do they, or do they not? Do they not care about it? Or do they, make an effort to sort of tidy everything up? What does the form of the work say about its content? Again, how does what the thing looks like, how it appears on the page, what does that say about its content? What's the relationship there? Is there a central or a focal passage that can be said to sum up the entirety of a work? Can we point to like one paragraph or a page or two and say, yep, that is the key that gives us the answer to unlock the meaning of this text? And then finally, how do rhythms or schemes of a poem contribute to the meaning or effect of a piece? Again, thinking about like how does the flow of the language, how does that affect the overall meaning of the piece? Like, does a poet constantly stop us mid-line? Why might they be trying to do that? These are the kinds of questions that a new critical approach is asking. Again, paying exclusive attention to the text, but paying incredibly close attention to those really kind of minute details. So what kinds of place does the new criticism have? Remember, I mentioned that it fell out of favor around the 1960s, and in a lot of ways, it's not really taken seriously anymore as a critical approach. Why is that? Well, in a lot of ways, it's due to the many drawbacks of the new criticism. By insisting that we can separate the art from the artist and look exclusively at the text of, at a literary text without considering things like who wrote it, under what conditions was it produced, where does it fall in literary history, like why was it produced, what effect does it have on readers? Like these are all really important questions that we in the last 60 years have asked a lot. And we understand that these are important things for us to be considering. And the new criticism says, nah, man, you can't talk about that. You can't even think about that. And what it does was it takes, and it's weird because in some ways it's this kind of like move against the politicization of literary criticism, but at the same time it is a very political move to be able to say, no, we are not going to pay attention to the fact that this person was a Nazi, or to do these other we're going to ignore this about them and read the poem and study and analyze the poem. Like that's it raises a lot of really difficult ethical questions. And that's one of the major drawbacks of new criticism. But why should we still learn about it? Well, I think in a lot of ways, what we can learn from the new criticism is the fact that those sort of methods of really close textual analysis. Like, yes, we should absolutely pay attention to the world around a text. And in future mini lecture videos, we're going to talk about a number of different approaches for you to think through and apply. But we also need to have those skills of close textual analysis. We also need to have those close reading skills. And I think starting from a base of new criticism, just to sort of develop some analytical chops, is a good place to start. And then we'll take those skills and we'll pack them up and we'll add in everything else on top of that. These are in a lot of ways sort of the building blocks of literary study. But the real meat and potatoes kind of comes later when we start talking about other critical lenses. But that's about all for this one. Thank you very much, and I will see you all in the next video.